There was a poet who said, "We are but names writ on water." A poet Paul Valéry says, "A poem is never finished, only abandoned." Thomas Gray remarked that poetry is thoughts that breathe and words that burn. And Carl Sandburg says that poetry is an echo, asking the shadow to dance. Caroline Duffy says you can find poetry in your everyday life, your memory, in what people say on the bus, in the news, or just what's in your heart. Jean Cocteau says, "The poet is a liar who always speaks the truth." Yevgeny Yevtushenko says, "Poetry is like a bird, it ignores all frontiers." While Rita Dove says, "Poetry is language at its most distilled and most powerful." Poetry is emotion, passion, love, grief, everything that is human. It is not for zombies by zombies, according to Tisonio Jose. No less a figure than Lawrence Ferlinghetti would have you believe that poetry is eternal graffiti written in the heart of everyone. Gwendolyn Brooks once said, "I felt that I had to write. Even if I had never been published, I knew that I would go on writing, enjoying it and experiencing the challenge." Sonia Sanchez would have you remember, all poets, all writers are political. They either maintain the status quo or they say, "Something's wrong, let's change it for the better." George Bataille says, "Poetry is always the opposite of poetry to some extent." Howard Nemerov says, "Write what you know. That should leave you with a lot of free time." Eugenio Montel says, "The poet often does not know, they will never know, whom they really write for." Stephen Spender says, "Great poetry is always written by somebody straining to go beyond what they can do." "When writing the story of your life, don't let anyone else hold the pen," said Harley Davidson. Someone once said, "A book is a dream that you hold in your hand." Bertrand Russell reminds you that your writing is never as good as you, but never as bad as you feared. Another poet says, "When you write, you have to reside in the unknown for as long as possible." Robert Frost would have you believe that writing a poem is discovering. Richard Hugo says, "Never write a poem about anything that ought to have a poem written about it." The ancient poet Rumi says, "A pen went scribbling along. When it tried to write love, it broke." William Hazlitt reminds us that poetry is all that is worth remembering in life. And Ishmael Reed says, "Writing poetry is the hard manual labor of the imagination." And Sexton says, "As for me, I am a watercolor. I wash off." Shel Silverstein says, "You'd better get your laughs while you're making your point, or you won't be doing it for very long." Mary Oliver considered, "Keep some room in your heart for the unimaginable." Dylan Thomas says, "A poem is an impermeable stretch of a river that is flowing in all directions, and all conflicting images within it should be reconciled with that brief pause in time." If you're trying to transform a brutalized society into one where people can live in dignity and hope, you begin with the empowering of the most powerless. You build from the ground up, said Adrienne Rich. Carolyn Forscher says, "We are responsible for the clarity of our vision. We have a say in the shaping of our sensibility. In the many thousand daily choices we make, we create ourselves and the voice with which we speak and work." Philip Levine says, "There will always be working people in my poems because I grew up with them, and I am a poet of memory." Jane Yolen says, "Ideas are the cheapest part of a writing. They're free. The hard part is what you do with the ideas you've gathered." "Poetry is not the thing said, but the way of saying it," says A.E. Houseman. Evelyn Waugh says, "There are no poetic ideas, only poetic utterances." While W.H. Auden says, "Poetry is the only art people haven't learned to consume like soup." I'm Brian Talwara. Thank you for spending some time with us today, and I hope this changes your mind about how you look at some poems out there in the world. Thank you. Hit like and subscribe if you so feel like, and I'll see you the next time.